All right, we're live at the NFL Combine. SNL, Landry Locker, Cody Stoots with you. It was a very active day. It was a very busy day. There was a lot going on, a lot of prospects met with, but right as we were about to go on, some breaking news. The Texans, according to the Starbucks baby, are interested in Deebo Samuel. And we've been talking about this. This has been thrown around immediately. We know he's not going to be a 49er. John Lynch has actually gone on record as saying that we know the Texans have needs at running back and wide receiver. He's played both. But we also know that Deebo Samuel has been kind of a shell of himself lately. He's been out of shape. And we don't know what exactly they're going to do and what Deebo Samuel still has left in the tank.
He's 29 years old. He's seen his stats decrease basically every year since he was one of the best receivers in the world in 2021. And his contract situation became untenable for the 49ers with the amount of production that he was putting together. They're going to lose, some cap space or they're going to have some dead cap associated with this. But I wouldn't be interested in his current cap situation, his current contract. I got to imagine the Texans would do some adjusting, maybe something similar to the Stefon Diggs deal, where they maybe adjusted it and kicked some of the cap hit out for a couple of years. I don't think this would be a long-term commitment. This kind of feels like one of those things where you take a year and you see how the guy's doing, then maybe at the end of the year you talk about doing something long-term. But I'm not willing to give up any sort of significant price for him either. Like, I understand there is maybe a bidding war as you see Jordan Schultz. He says, hey, you got Broncos, Steelers, and the Commanders in on this, but I'm not giving up anything super significant for Deebo Samuel, but they need a lot of bodies in that wide receiver room, and DeMeco Ryans feels like the type of coach that would be able to motivate him at least.
Yeah, and I think that's what it comes down to. I was talking to Grant Cohn, who covers the 49ers, and Deebo came up today when we were talking. I actually see him over there. I know we're probably going to see a selfie video of him talking about Deebo. You can see it basically in action right now. But I asked him about Deebo and what he thought of him, and he said it would come down to respect for the coach. He said that Deebo Samuel clearly didn't respect Kyle Shanahan after a while. He said that he was out of shape, and he basically said that relationship just kind of hit a wall. So he said it would come down to just basically respect for the coach. And I don't know too many players who don't respect DeMeco Ryans. I mean, I would think Kyle Shanahan has a decent track record. I don't know like the full history of Kyle Shanahan. But if that is what it's about, and it comes down to respect for the coach, I think that's an area that the Texans are pretty solid in right now, because there seems to be a lot of respect, especially at the combine. Like yesterday, we talked about the Texans getting love and DeMeco. Like there was more love today for multiple players, not on the defensive side, but on the offensive side as well. So if it's going to come down to respecting the head coach, I think that's something that the Texans have going for them. Now, then the question becomes, how much does he have left? It's not going to be the current price tag. There's obviously going to be, do you even have to trade for him too? San Francisco really has no leverage. Like, you should have to give up virtually nothing for him because they have zero leverage.
Yeah, they're taking a significant financial hit no matter what the situation is with him. So it's just about them sort of, best adjusting, best mitigating it. However, they're losing lots of money on a trade, and a release is really bad too. They'd probably prefer the trade, so you're helping them out a little bit. So, I wouldn't go fourth rounder. I'd go fifth or seventh rounder. The Texans only have 6 selections in this upcoming draft, and I know Deebo Samuel has been good in the NFL. I know he knows what it takes to be an NFL receiver. And as much as I'd love to tell you, hey, there's some guys late in the draft at wide receiver that I like, I'd rather have Deebo Samuel for 1 year using that 5th-round pick or that 7th-round pick to go and get him than a 5th-round wide receiver or 7th-round wide receiver.
Yeah, and I don't know how they would use him. Maybe they'd like to use him on some sweeps and stuff like that. He's not going to be an all-out running back. But how would they use him would be interesting as well. And what kind of shape is he in? I mean, do they need to see him before? Can he play his way into shape? Because if he looks like he looked at the Super Bowl, I don't know that that's someone you trade for.
Yeah, he did not look like he was in great shape at the Super Bowl. But, hey, guys in the offseason, they don't have to be in shape in the offseason. They got to be in shape in season. So, again, 4 years ago, he's one of the best players in the world at the wide receiver position. And injuries, and it seems like maybe just willingness to care about the situation have diminished his past few seasons. But there's still some talent there. And like Landry mentioned, there's multiple ways that you could use Deebo Samuel in addition to just throwing him the football. You can hand him the football, and that sort of lessens your need to fully address the depth chart of the running back room. Maybe you could spend a little bit less time and assets and fine-tuning things if you knew you had Deebo Samuel. And if it's a one-year deal, hey, use him however you need to use him, and I'm sure he'd be on board with that so that he can maximize his value heading into free agency when he's 30. He's going to be 29 next season, so if it's a one-year contract, let's see what you can get out of him, and you can use him to the best of your ability and as much as you need to, because he's going to want to get a big deal.
Yeah, and I think the most important thing too is you're still going to have to invest young, because this is kind of why the 49ers, like on top of the fact that the 49ers are getting rid of Deebo, or willing to get rid of Deebo because he's not what he was a few years ago, they've also invested pretty decently at replacements for Deebo Samuel. They had a Christian McCaffrey trade when Deebo was having to play a lot of running back. They drafted Ayuk a while ago, but they drafted Ayuk in the first round. They just paid him, and they drafted Pearsall last year. So they have young guys to replace Deebo Samuel. Deebo Samuel is not like a fix everything solution to your wide receiver room. If you just bring in Deebo Samuel, it's not a fix everything. But as we've said, there's going to be multiple layers of what the Texans do and how they approach the wide receiver position. So it's just one of many things, but it should not in any way, shape, or form. It's not an either or. It's not I would rather have a young receiver than Deebo Samuel. You're going to have veteran receivers and young receivers added to this roster. That's just inevitable.
Yeah, Deebo Samuel is not the only thing that you do at the wide receiver position. You go out there and you add perhaps another veteran wide receiver via free agency, and then you try to add some draft picks as well and get as many people as you can in there to figure out and fight for that 3 through 6 spots on the depth chart. Rookies or whatever you have left over from the team that was there that played last year. If it's Xavier Hutchinson, if it's John Mechie, all that kind of stuff. So you have them battle it out, but Deebo and then some, you're on your way to fixing what is a questionable spot of this roster.
Yeah, it's going to be something that, and again, it's Schultz who put it out there. He said there's other teams, so let's just keep an eye on what happens with Deebo Samuel. It's something that we've been talking about for a while. I think it's pretty 50-50 split. Some are willing, some are not. The Cup thing, I don't know if it changes, but there does seem to be kind of a direction of the Rams leaning towards bringing back Matthew Stafford. So,
I mean, does that change? If Cooper Kupp adjusts his contract, does that change his situation?
Perhaps.
So, okay, well, maybe he sticks around and Deebo's the only veteran that can be out there and trade. I mean, this kind of feels it's not the same as Joe Mixon, but like they're trying to get rid of the guy. He's not going to be on the 49ers. Hey, everybody get your last best offer in, see what happens, see if they can get something, avoid a little bit of their cap charge from San Francisco's standpoint. And then whatever team trades for him, and if it's the Texans, they get hopefully a super motivated Deebo Samuel ready to do whatever he can do and whatever he needs to do at the wide receiver spot.
The wide receivers today, we got to look at the wideouts. Not an impressive group.
I mean, there's guys that are good players, but it's not anywhere near as deep as last year. Last year was the year to go be grabbing a wide receiver.
Yeah, this is not the year for that. I was actually intrigued by some of the guys at the bottom. Did talk to Ibuka. He's obviously a big CJ guy. A lot of faith. Sounded a lot like CJ, as did Trey Henderson. Both of whom met with the Texans. Both of whom said they would like to play with CJ. But outside of that, that seems like the most realistic option at 25. I could actually see them going running back as much as I could receiver, assuming that Ibuka's off the board.
I would. I mean, if you had Deebo Samuel, that maybe would change your approach there at 25 with both of the running back and wide receiver position, wouldn't it? Like, couldn't you focus a little bit more on defense or a defensive tackle or something like that?
Good. I mean, and that's the other thing that we got to keep an eye on is what the D line looks like. I know there's a lot of whispers about, who are they gonna use to replace, who's gonna replace Fatukasi. I don't think that they're looking at this offseason, like when it comes to getting a D tackle, as hey, we're gonna try to replace fully Fatukasi. I think they're trying to increase the standard and the level and try to crank it up a notch, like they did the secondary last year as safety and corner. I don't think they're trying to replace Foley Fatukasi. I think they're trying to get guys that are on a much higher scale. But the Deebo Samuel thing would be the first thing to look at.
Yeah, I mean, I would stress wide receiver less at 25, unless somebody just you never expected to be there was there. I would stress wide receiver less at 25 if they had Deebo Samuel. It would move up a little bit for me if they didn't have Deebo Samuel. I don't think he makes you say, don't get a wide receiver early. It definitely changes things for you.
How does he fit in what Kaylee wants to do, too? That's the other thing, because we don't really know. Like, if Bobby were here, we'd be like, oh, shit. There's going to be 25 reverses with Deebo Samuel, like, per game. There's probably going to be about 17 wide receiver screens sideways, whether he's fully healthy or not. We don't know what Nick Caley's going to do. We don't know what it looks like in the offense. They call it a hybrid. The other thing is, I think the value of Deebo Samuel, when he was, as you called him appropriately, one of the best players in the league, I think the value was that hybrid. I know he was like anti-running back and there was like all that drama, but I think that was actually what made him one of the best players in the league, was the fact that he was at wide receiver 1 minute, he was at running back, and it just seems like it's been, he's still had some good years since that time, but it does feel like him as a natural receiver, it's a lot different. Like the mystique of Deebo Samuel was not created as just some natural route running, precise type of receiver.
No, he's a rough wide receiver. Like it's not pristine, clean, easy for him at the wide receiver spot. He's physical. He can win some of those short routes pretty quick, and he doesn't always run super clean, precise routes, but he gets open a lot of times thanks to the way offenses scheme for him and scheme with him and the way defenses have played him in the past. But, the ability to hand him the football is what makes him interesting. If you told me I'm just getting wide receiver Deebo Samuel, I'm not interested. I'm really not. I mean, he had 1,700 scrimmage yards in 2021. He's averaged 929 scrimmage yards in the 3 seasons since. So I'm not super interested in like trying to add a piece to the offense and try to make him a focal point if he's going to give me 900 yards when the season's all said and done.
Well,
so there needs to be a little projection ahead of what he's done this past few years. Like, can he do a little bit more with Nick Caley, with CJ Stroud, with the Houston Texans?
The other thing is, there's kind of like an example of someone coming from San Francisco to Houston. Don't know if it was just tongue in cheek, but Cone said that Jimmy Ward wasn't the biggest Kyle Shanahan fan because he didn't want to play nickel. And I do find it interesting that was a talking point when Jimmy Ward left San Francisco and he came to the Texans. It was, I'm not playing nickel. Now, emergency situation last year, that tone kind of changed. I asked him about it, and it was just kind of like I'm just going to do what the coach wants me to do. And he was awesome at it, as he was before he came to Houston. So I do wonder, like, is there a D'Amico dynamic there? And Deebo's not just coming out and calling out Kyle Shanahan, but it's obvious he was out of shape. It's obvious he wasn't the player that he was. It was obvious that he was arguing on social media. He was talking about not getting the ball enough. Who calls the plays? It's Kyle Shanahan. So I know different situations create like different environments. for between players and coaches. But I do wonder like how DeMeco Ryans looks at taking a, for lack of a better term, disgruntled player from the coach that basically took him under his wing and taught him how to do this. Like at an extreme level, Kyle Shanahan called him the best assistant he's ever had. Like, does DeMeco just look at that and say, okay, well, we'll try to get the best of this guy? Because it wasn't, if Jimmy Ward didn't like Kyle Shanahan, it wasn't public and they were moving on. It was obvious. Mm-hmm. I do wonder from like a DeMeco perspective how he looks at it.
Well, if we're using the Jimmy Ward example, I'm not interested in Deebo Samuel because if Jimmy Ward didn't want to play nickel, he didn't play nickel when he got here, and DeMeco Ryans made it very clear Jimmy Ward was going to play safety and they weren't going to use him at that nickel spot. So if that's going to be like what DeMeco acquiesces to make the guy happy, I'm not interested in wide receiver only Deebo Samuel. But at the same time, if and that's a very extreme.
But I think that's what you're getting. I think you are going to get just wide receiver Deebo at this point.
I'm not interested. Then I'm not interested at all. Like there's just I don't want just wide receiver Deebo Samuel on the Houston Texans.
Well, then it's probably not going to be a thing.
Well, then there we go. We got to talk about the rookie wide receivers then.
And I also think that when Jimmy came to Houston, it just to kind of be a little bit more open, like when Jimmy was dictating what he wanted to do and where he wanted to play, there's a couple of things. He was the best option. I think Deebo, as just a receiver with how things are set up right now, he would be the best option. So he has that going for him. But DeMeco was a first-time head coach. He was trying to kind of get players on board with what he was about. Jimmy Ward knew what was about, what he was about, and he probably didn't have as much leverage as he does now to kind of tell you, hey, well, you might not want to play the hybrid position that you're used to, but you're going to have to do it.
I mean, sure. Yeah, that's another thing too. Is like you could sort of, that's what phrase I'm looking for. You could put the Band-Aid on. Hey, we're not going to use you like we did like they did in 2021, where you had all these rushing attempts, but we're not going to like totally erase using you as a potential rusher. Like maybe we'll cut that number in half. Like it doesn't have to be an absolute. And the other thing is how much of this can and should be a part of the process. Like, can they? I mean, do they know that Deebo doesn't want to do any running back? Would he change his mind? Would he say, "Oh, for you, coach, I do the running back stuff"? Do the other teams want to use him as a running back? Does he have a preference? Like, hey, this team says I'm not going to be a running back at all, so I'd actually really like to go there. I mean, he doesn't have really a say in it. The 49ers do. So that there's a lot of levels to. I mean, DeMeco's a positive in this situation, but like the way, if you're using Jimmy Ward as an example, then I'm a little less interested because then Jimmy didn't do what Jimmy was the best at.
Yeah, he didn't, but he did good. He was solid enough. That ship kind of sailed and he couldn't stay healthy. So that's where we were.
Well, the ship actually got new sails and is still in the harbor. That's exactly where the ship is. The ship was taking on water, had large holes in it, and they're like, let's put new sails on it and keep it in the harbor and see what happens. And we'll find out in 2025, I guess.
Yeah, and they gave him an extension, which was a little bit crazy, I would say. Let's talk about the combine. Let's talk about the running backs. Let's talk about the receivers, two positions that Deebo Samuel has played. It is SNL, Landry Locker, Cody Stoots with you. Let's start with the running backs. I think it's a very intriguing position. I think it's a position of need, not just in the short term, but in the long term. We don't know how long Joe Mixon's going to be here. And look, it's early, but the Texans are meeting with pretty much every running back that they can meet with. So I think they're very well aware. Caserio, he used to be known for piling up running backs, whether it's early in the draft, late in the draft in New England, and DeMeco Ryans, we know they do that in San Francisco. It appears maybe we're transitioning to where that might be a thing for the Texans, and I could see them taking a running back really early.
I mean, is 25 too early for a running back when you've got some of these other things that you need to plug and put in here, and it is a deep running back class? Is 25 too early?
I mean, it might be just about opportunity. It just kind of depends what they think they see at wide receiver, what's going on at DT. But I mean, if let's say that they like someone better than Genty. Let's start with someone that I spoke with that I found very interesting. North Carolina running back Omarion Hampton. Now, I had this discussion yesterday with John Harris. I brought it up yesterday on the stream. I asked him about Omarion Hampton, and his whole thing was basically that he's too much like Joe Mixon. He is Joe Mixon. That's what he said. He said he is Joe Mixon. That was his comp. And I was like, okay, well, I'll take two.
I'll take two Joe Mixons, please.
Yeah, I'll take two. That's fine. We can figure it out. Joe can catch the ball. Like, you can bring in other options. Like, that's fine. If you tell me I'm getting Joe Mixon at 25 in a very suspect wide receiver draft, because a lot of times when we discuss the draft, and this is my pet peeve, I hammer this home, it's always, well, you need this wide receiver. You need a wide receiver more than a running back. If you told me I could get a really, really good wide receiver at 25, all right, let's go. All right, let me just write that and hand it to Roger Goodell, and let's go. Let's get the good wide receiver. I don't know that that's the case, and I don't know that this draft is built that way. So you're seeing a lot of teams. You're seeing the way running backs is. If Omarion Hampton is Joe Mixon, let's say he is. Let's say he's the next Joe Mixon. You're telling me you would pass on that? That's crazy. Like, people actually say that out loud. Well, we don't need another running back. Okay, so having two Joe Mixons on your team would suck. I don't need to diversify my assets that much. I'll just take two Joe Mixons. Please.
No, we'll take two Joe Mixons, and we'll figure it out. Would you like two excellent tomahawk steaks, or would you like one tomahawk steak and some cream spinach? Actually, I think I'll take the two tomahawk steaks.
Exactly. And I thought it was interesting how Omarion Hampton, he said a few things that really kind of opened my eyes, and just I started using my imagination. And I don't know what the guy's going to be. It might be an opportunity in the second round. Who knows? But I'm saying if they think he's RB1, but it's a big if. Like, let's say that they look at that and they say, he doesn't fumble as much as Genty. There's a little bit of he can kind of work on his receiving a little bit, but
did it against better competition.
He has skills that equate to being a good receiver out of the backfield. By the way, Genty's awful in that area, so it's not like you're going against Saquon Barkley. We really like this guy. Joe Mixon's got 1 year left. Joe Mixon actually got banged up last year, and the usage wasn't great. And he could take this kid under his wing, and then after that, we could have a good running. We'd have Joe Mixon for the next 3 years. And again, these are ifs. If he's Joe Mixon, and if the Texans like him the most. And here's where it got interesting for me. 30 seconds into his media availability, they asked him who he models his game after. I think you can guess who he said.
Did he say Joe Mixon?
He said Joe Mixon.
Okay.
Then they asked him about who would you like to pair with? And this is where I'm kind of thinking to myself, okay, all right, so he models his game after Joe Mixon. Even like the smartest football guys, they always say, well, you got to have thunder and lightning. You got to have this and you got to have that. Like, there's always that. And by the way, you remember when Thunder and Lightning was supposed to be Ron Fat Dane and Tiki Barber? That didn't work out. They probably should have gotten someone more like Tiki Barber instead of trying to get some fatty to put in the backfield with them. Like, it didn't work out. But here, and we're right by the Giants, aren't we? But I mean, they probably should have. I mean,
the Giants are right there. That's great.
They agree.
Hey, remember when you guys ruined your running back room?
They agree. But here's the thing. They asked him who he would like to pair with, and he said Joe Mixon. And I was like, damn, so he's thought about this. Like, he's thought about like pairing with Joe Mixon. And then I asked him, have you visited with the Texans? He said, yes, it went well. So he's kind of imagining it right there, because he's had the meetings and he's imagining him and Joe Mixon pairing. He's talking about how much he likes him. Again, these are two ifs. There's two ifs to take into this. I can see people in the chat saying, why would you want another running back? I want another running back because it's an impactful position and they have no depth. Like, if you had another running back that was capable last year when Joe Mixon was out, who knows how much different stuff looks. Even in game, if you had someone who was able to do some other things, like even if Joe Mixon was healthy, I mean, you can still get him a nice amount of touches. Go with the hot hand and figure it out, and you also prolong Joe Mixon. But I'm not opposed to the running back as much as anyone else.
And you limit your risk by having somebody that you feel really good about behind Joe Mixon. As he gets older, as he deals with a tremendous amount of carries over the course of his career. So you limit your risk. I like Hampton a lot.
I'm in on it.
Hampton would probably be the number one running back in most draft years. It just so happens he's behind Genty. It sounds like Landry likes him a little bit more than Genty.
No, I like Genty. I mean, I like Genty, but all I'm saying is, if you're so down on this kid, then why are you down on him? The most common thing I've heard is, well, he probably needs to improve as a pass catcher. Genty he's one of the worst receiving running backs like in the draft. Like, and that might be just they didn't need him to because they could just hand it to him in that conference and he could run for 20 yards. So that might be about opportunity, but if that's what you're holding against him, the question is, just have this a completely different way. Let's say that the wide receivers are trimmed. Let's say that the D linemen are trimmed. And let's say on Nick Caserio and D'Amico Ryan's board, it says RB1. Would you be, and let's say they know what they're doing. Would you be opposed, like, how to the impact that RB1 has, not just this year, but the year after, the year after, the year after, the year after? Because they've shown that they don't care. They don't function in just a 1 year window. They function in 2 year windows in a number of ways, 2 and 3 year windows. I'm not opposed.
I'm not opposed either. I mean, I would like to see how maybe some of the free agency stuff plays out, but I'm not opposed to spending that 25th overall pick on him. I tell you what, you got to get through some running back needy squads for him to get there, unfortunately. So, but if he gets there, then it might be a sign from the football gods that you should draft him.
Then there was the Ohio State guys, the Ohio State duo. Where do we want to start? We want to start with Trey Henderson. He's going by Trey now, by the way. That was his name tag. So,
yeah, so there was no more Travion. Now just Trey.
No more of that. He said that the strength of his game is catching the ball, being explosive, complete back, all that. He has visited with the Texans, and he's really strong. He's really got a nice relationship with C.J. Stroud, it seems. There's like a bunch of Ohio State and Georgia reporters here, and they were talking about like he used to be angry or something. They said he used to be angry, and don't know what that means, but he said he leaned on God. He's a better man now. He loves CJ. He visited with the Texans.
Okay. I mean, angry is not a bad thing to be for a running back. It's okay to be angry. You guys to run angry, don't you?
I have no idea where it came from. It was kind of weird, but it was an Ohio State beat reporter. Also had a nice run-in with the Georgia beat. Like 4 Georgia beat reporters were here. I'll tell you what they had to say, because there's an intriguing prospect that we'll get to in a sec. But yay or nay on Trey Henderson, when do you think this happens? This is a third-round thing, second, third?
This is running back run started in the second round, and you got to grab him. Like, that'd be the thing. That'd be the second-round pick. Like, maybe it's a move up 3-4 spots to go and get the guy because you think that there's about to be a run. But I could see him pretty easily being the 4th or 5th running back off the board, and maybe not even having to wait that long.
Yeah, he's someone to keep an eye on. Judkins didn't get anything on him about the Texans. He was a pretty wise dude too. Obviously, he was just at Ohio State for 1 year, so I couldn't ask the obligated C.J. Stroud question. He was at Ole Miss before, but he seems like a sharp dude. That's like a complete just thumping back. Like that is.
They're both just better tailored to be in a running back room versus being the guy. Like you talked about Hampton. Hampton shares with Joe Mixon. You move on from Joe Mixon. Hampton's the guy. If you bring in Henderson or you bring in Judkins from Ohio State, they're sharing with Joe Mixon. And then when Joe Mixon's done, then you've got to get somebody to share with them again. So they're different levels of prospect, and they have very defined roles as sort of running back 2 with a guy like Joe Mixon versus Hampton's running back 2 because you have Joe Mixon, and then he becomes Joe Mixon after that. So it's a little bit different, and that's kind of the rest of the running backs. But again, if you find a guy that fills a certain role, Henderson can catch the ball really well, take it to the house anytime he touches it. Judkins with a little bit of that short yardage excellence. If they have a defined role, it can make sense.
Yeah, and there's other running backs too to look at that we talked about. Cam Scatabo, a lot of people excited about him. His podium thing got pushed back, and then they took him on the car wash. Car wash is where you basically are on every effing radio show here. I asked him after. He was nice enough to tell me he did visit with the Texans informally. So there's that. I don't know how he fits. I don't know what that guy looks like in the NFL, to be honest with you.
I can't figure out where he's going to get drafted.
I think he's day 3. I think he's day 3.
There was a group of fantasy football guys who were putting together combine, like prize picks, and Scatterbo was a popular. Oh no, he's going to be much slower than the predicted number. He's going to be much slower.
Oh, he's going to have a bad combine.
Yeah, that's where it's like
it's going to be a really bad combine for him. We're talking day 3, and you always need that like extra popular day 3. We need to go into a day 3, like the perfect day 3. Like, oh my God, there he is. Is he going to go? Da da da. Cam Scatabo, who was here today. Jalen Milroe. Okay. And that's it. Those 2.
Yeah, Scatabo's like a guy that's either going to get drafted way before everybody thinks, and someone's going to be like, why'd you do that? Or he's going to get drafted way after where everybody thinks. I don't know that he really fits what the Texans need from the running back position. Like, they need somebody who's a lot more defined in their role. Like he has a very specific, he can do this day 1 with Joe Mixon, and then when Joe Mixon's gone, he can continue to do that or elevate. I don't know that Scatabo's that guy. So.
Going to the soup. JJ Stagg says, Fedone is to me what Teagan is to LL, SNL on top. Hey, I like him way more than Quintiano is kind of a bit at this point. I like him. Can't quit him. They're making it easy he just keeps arriving. But I think Fedone is awesome. I think he's good. He might be one of my favorite tight ends in this draft. When you talk about what it will take to give up on him or to get him, I think he's 3rd round. I think he's 3rd round pick. But I think he can, as far as like complete tight end, like block and receive, he's up there. And he just it seems like he's someone that they would really, really like.
For him, I'm really interested to see how he tests, because the knee injuries and stuff that he dealt with initially at Nebraska, did that affect some of his athleticism? Because big-time tight ends usually have some level of elite athleticism. So I'll be interested to see how he tests, because that'll showcase some of the athleticism.
Yeah. Jacob says, Landry, have you visited with the Texans? I have.
It was an informal visit
with the Texans, quite honestly. It was very informal. God. Preston says, younger Joe Mixon, I'm down for it if I want an RB and 2 wide receivers out of this draft. 2 wide receivers going to be tough, although I do have some guys at the bottom that kind of stuck out.
I like these wide receivers probably more than you do.
Okay, who would you – name the wide receivers that you would be willing to take at 25.
Emeka Egbuka and Luther Burden.
Okay. Not Golden?
I'm not a Golden fan. I'm really not. I understand what excites people about him, and I mean, Daniel Jeremiah kind of put him and Egbuka on the same level. I'm not as excited about him as some of the other draft prospects, and so round 2, sure, run the card up, but 25, no, thank you.
Yeah, that's 25 is way too rich for me. I did find something interesting, though, and this was a localized ob, and this happened in a matter of probably about 30 seconds. The Johnson from Oregon was speaking, and he was talking about how much he admires Tank Dell and how Tank Dell's helped him through this process. And
That's Tez Johnson, the wide receiver.
Tez Johnson.
Yep.
And he was talking about how much he admires him and he's helped him and all this type of stuff. And then I walked over to Golden, and literally as soon as I kind of squared up and see what was going on, he's talking about Tank Dell too, how much he means to him. And those two weren't the only ones. There was another reference about Tank Dell's route. So you have 3 wide receivers mentioning Tank Dell. Tell the people who the third was.
It was Xavier Restrepo from Miami, who's a small slot guy, like a lot of people believe Tank was when he was coming out. And he was like, they asked him, like, which wide receivers do you watch? He's like, I don't really watch the whole game. He's like, I take from everybody's different pieces of their game. And his thing that he said he took from Tank Dell was, I guess, the deep release from guys, because he's a smaller guy. You need to get down the field and still get away from guys when they're trailing with you. So, I mean, Tank Dell gets a lot of love and respect. The unfortunate aspect is I don't know that Tank Dell's playing football for the Houston Texans much, if at all, in 2025. So what happens in 2026, who knows? It's unfortunate he's not a part of the plan here in 2025 because a lot of these guys would love to share a wide receiver room with him, although you wouldn't need some of these guys if you had Tank Dell.
My question is with him too, though, is does he prevent you from going that route? In other words, like when they look at Tez Johnson and he's got the same body type and he plays the same way, do they like does the fact that Tank has got hurt twice, does that scare them from drafting that type of receiver? Or on the other hand, does it scare them from drafting him because they believe that Tank Dell is going to be a part of plans moving forward? Maybe not this year, but next year. Does it stop you? Because I don't know that you can function right now, and I'm not, and this sucks to say, but I don't know that I'm functioning as if I'm counting on Tank Dell to be a part of the Texans' plans and like a very, very pivotal piece of the wide receiver core. I would love for him to be right. I think it's almost unfair to him to expect that. The first time that Tank Dell goes back on the practice field and stretches in his first drill, that's an accomplishment all in itself. So I'm not going to sit here based on the reaction we saw, based on the injury, based on the fact that we both probably anticipate he's not going to play next year. I'm not going to sit here and like anticipate that. I just wonder how they look at it. If maybe they just kind of don't want to be in that area of drafting guys that are smaller receivers and how much they think that Tank can or can't be a part of this squad moving forward.
Yeah, it's one of those, like, did we learn our lesson things? Is there a lesson to be learned situation from that? And do you go with a bigger slot guy, someone like Jack Bash from TCU or Jaden Higgins who can play from the slot a little bit as a bigger guy? Maybe. I don't know that you – I would tell you that the fact that Tank Dell at his size succeeded when most guys his size don't, the likelihood of that repeating itself in such short form in the NFL is kind of low. So if you're playing the odds, like this feels like a way Caserio would think about this thing. Like, hey, small guys usually don't have success. We took a risk. Our guys did have success. The next guy is less likely to have success based on the numbers of players at that size who aren't consistent, useful NFL players.
On the Soup Sports Talk with D, he says he wants Wester in the late round.
Yeah, Colorado wide receiver. He was probably my favorite conversation today. He just had such a good personality.
He had the quote of the day when I was there. You weren't even over there. You'd already left. He said, "You don't have to be the guy to be the guy." Because they kept asking about Travis Hunter and Shador, and he gets along with all of them. I saw Deion Sanders Jr. was there filming some footage. I guess they took a trip to Brazil or something. But Deion Jr. was over there. He does all their social media. Like everything you see social media is Deion Sanders Jr. Got like a heavy ass camera, like professional. But that was his quote. I don't know if he's a special team guy though. I mean, I think he said he'd be willing to. I just don't know if he really is a special teams guy.
I'm glad you brought up special teams because he did do a little punt returning at FAU, not as much at Colorado. But there were so many running backs and wide receivers who were the dude for their team. Like they were the guy. They were either the top running back for their team or they were the top wide receiver for their team that just volunteered how important special teams was. And I don't know if that's just lip service. I don't know if that's, hey, the agent being like, hey, make sure when they ask you, tell them you love special teams. I don't know exactly why that is, or if guys just truly appreciate the art of special teams and how that position group, specifically running back and wide receivers, are more inclined to play it. So, late round wide receivers have got to be able to contribute on special teams. Like you got to be able to do something. You got to be able to be a gunner, or you got to be able to be a returner. Like you got to be able to do something because you got to stay busy because you're not getting the ball a bunch if you're the 5th or 6th wide receiver on the roster. Like, what can you do for me on game day? You sitting on the bench as wide receiver 5. Nah. Can you return some punts? Can you return some kicks?
And with that, here on SNL, I got 2 late round guys to watch that kind of fall there. Because the other thing about the Texans is it's not just the top end guys. They need guys who can do that. John Mechie, I know he had the one play on the fake punt against the Cowboys. He's not really someone who loves playing special teams. He doesn't love it. They might make him do it. He doesn't love it at all. It's not his thing. I thought that Brew McCoy was an interesting case study, and Brew McCoy is interesting. I can't believe that he's at this combine. It feels like he's been on the radar for damn near 30 years. I remember when he was one of the top recruits in the nation. He was going to go to SC. Then he went to Texas. Then he was on Texas campus for 2 weeks. Then he went back to USC. Then he left USC. He ended up at Tennessee. Sharp dude, though. And he said he did meet with the Texans. He said he is willing to play special teams. He's kind of Xavier Hutchinson-like. But I think he's probably would be a better special teams player than Xavier Hutchinson is. Then there was an interesting one.
Well, one thing about Brew McCoy, and I meant to get over there and ask him, I wonder if some team looks at him and says, he's a pretty good athlete as a wide receiver, not elite, but he'd be a really good tight end. I wonder if some team finds him and says, hey, we're going to put a couple pounds on you, make you a pass-catching tight end, and go out there and block a little bit. I'd be interested.
He just seems like he has potential to be a really good special teamer too. Like he just seems he's just one of those like physically imposing dudes. He also seems like he's willing to do it.
All the Tennessee guys loved him when they were talking about him.
Yeah. And I asked him the question that we were talking about yesterday, where we talked about if it's an advantage to play in multiple systems, like heading into the NFL. I asked him, I was like, you kind of bounced around a little bit.
A little bit's an understatement.
Well, he said, yeah, in hindsight, maybe so. So he was open to that.
I just worry about him. He's constantly hurt, and he even got hurt at the Senior Bowl after one day. So it's like,
yeah, that's a problem. I mean, he might be an undrafted guy. I mean, this might be an undrafted guy that you kick the tires on, McCoy.
Thinking about priority undrafted, I'd do that.
Yeah, Dominic Lovett's another interesting one. And he just seems like something the Texans would just fall in love with. I walked over there. He was holding court talking about special teams for like 3 minutes. He was talking about being a gunner. He was talking about return game. He was talking about downing punts inside the 5. They asked him why he likes special teams. He's like, I like being on the field. I like football. I don't think special teams gets enough credit for how much it can change a football game. And he was basically going through every special teams area. And I was sitting there like, okay, what's going on with this dude? Like he loves special teams. So I asked him about Kamari Lassiter. Because I saw that him and Lassiter were cool when he transferred over there. And he actually said he talked to Kamari Lassiter yesterday on the phone to calm his nerves. He called him 3 and said that, he likes Kamari Lassiter. He has not met with the Texans, but he didn't say, I haven't yet. He said, I want to. So I could see this guy making a team just based on special teams, because a lot of coaches will say special teams is kind of like about want, And there's a lot of these guys who, I mean, when they're the stud in college, they're not forced to play special teams. This guy already loves it. He's not the worst receiver either. Like he had the drops were a problem at Georgia. It seemed like for whatever reason it was from the top to the bottom. But this seems like the kind of guy they would like. It seems like a kind of guy that Frank Ross could love. And it might also be like one of those undrafted guys. Like when I talk about these two guys, Lovett and McCoy, I could see these being undrafted guys that you bring in camp and they push Mechie and Hutchinson.
I wonder if he's maybe just like because of the special teams prowess and the prevalence of slot wide receiver play, if he'd sneak into the back end of the draft. And it's one of those guys where you're like, hey, I bet people are already calling him to see if he can be a priority free agent. Okay, let's go use a draft pick on him. Hey, we got a 6th, we got a 7th. Let's go use a draft pick on him. He's got some pretty good like grades at some of the scouting sites. So I don't know. The drops may be a big enough issue that it kind of pushes him down. So we'll see. But two interesting names, certainly. This is the time of year where you just kind of start – you write a name on a sticky note, you just kind of check on it every now and then.
The other thing that was interesting about this, and I thought it was pretty funny, was the Georgia beat reporters. There were 4 Georgia beat reporters here, like OGs, like right in the front. And every time he kept talking, I was just entertained naturally. I didn't think much of it. I was like, oh, this must be him. They kept going. Every time he talked, they'd be like. And then he gave like one answer, and I guess it's the top guy on the beat was like, who is this guy? And I was like, what? And so they asked him. I guess he was like real quiet and like didn't say much like when he was at Georgia. And he said because he just like the Kirby Smart factor, but he had a personality like crazy.
Kirby Smart scared him quiet.
They thought it was a joke. Like they were like, is he punking us? Does he hate us? Like what's going on? But I guess he kind of opened up, which I think Casso kind of adds. I think I'm talking myself into my first potential undrafted late round guy and love it. But it seems like he's really excited about this opportunity. And he's willing to do whatever. And he did it at Georgia too. But I asked him about Lassiter. They kind of said that they made it seem like he was always funny.
Maybe he's got to get through the personality. And
they said he's pretty funny. Favorite. They basically called him the coach's pet. And I said, I remember that rant. Yeah, I said I remember that rant after the Florida State game, the viral rant
with his stupid visor. That kid didn't have to play in this game. He didn't have to do that.
His mom told him he had a first-round grade, and you know why he played? Because he loves football. And that's what we're about here at Georgia. We don't have guys opting out of bowl games. We got a bunch of Kamari Lassiters, and if you have 90 Kamari Lassiters to stay out of the cars, then you got a chance to win some football games.
Stay out of the cars.
So did anyone else stick out at running back? I understand you caught up with Iowa running back Caleb Johnson, who is a very popular pick.
Caleb Johnson, some people feel like he's better than Amarion Hampton, and some people feel like there's no chance he's a first rounder and he's for sure a day 2 guy. And I can't get a good read on I'm like the athletic testing's not going to change that. Like he's not going to go out there and be like, oh, well, he's actually a super athlete and we'll just move him up on the board. Like that's not going to change it for me, but I can't figure out where he's supposed to go. Because if he was sitting there at 58 and you hadn't made a running back investment prior to that, that's a pretty easy selection for me. But I don't know that I'm comfortable with him at 25 like I would be Amarion Hampton from North Carolina. So the Iowa running back, where's he going to go?
Hell no, at 25.
It's obviously not a situation for 25, but there's some people that think he could sneak in front of Amarion Hampton, and I really like Amarion Hampton. So there's something there. There's definitely something there.
SMU running back Brashard Smith, interesting one. What'd you gather from him?
So what teams actually told Brashard Smith, we like that you haven't been some sort of workhorse running back. We love that you don't have any, as much wear and tear as some of these other guys that are out there. And I think that was kind of a nice way to say we were really impressed with you're at SMU because you didn't play much at Miami. But he got asked to work out at wide receiver. because they like his ability to catch the ball out of the backfield. He kicked ass at the Senior Bowl, and he talked to the Texans at the Senior Bowl. His representation told me that. And then today I was like, did you catch it with the Texans here at the Combine? He's like, yeah, I talked to him again. And I was like, okay. So this guy's definitely on the radar, and really good receiving back. Probably not the best receiving back, but really good receiving back. Can get it done on the ground. There were stretches of SMU season where he carried the offense. So I like him a lot, and the Texans seem to be fairly interested in him. So
USC running back Woody Marks. This one's an interesting one too.
Mr. Pass Catcher. I mean, just incredible from a receiving standpoint, the running back spot. Not going to give you nearly as much from a running standpoint, but as a very clear, defined role for your team. He's going to be your pass catching running back. He's going to be in there and help out with the pass blocking, and then he's got enough from a rushing standpoint that you're not totally and wholly telegraphing everything. And he's a John Harris favorite as well. I found out about that.
Okay. And then one of my favorites, special place in my heart, special place in Houston's heart, Jaden Blue.
Jaden Blue.
So Jaden Blue, do it louder.
Jaden Blue.
Yeah, no. So he was the second Longhorn that said he was going to break Xavier Worthy's 40 record. Isaiah Bond said it earlier, and he didn't laugh. He was pretty serious.
Oh, he wasn't joking about it. He was like,
no. He said 4-2. He said 4-2-1, 4-2-0 or something, and I was kind of like, oh. And then I went over to Jaden Blue. He was at a table, and he said it, and I laughed, and he looked at me. He said he was going to break the 40 time. I just kind of laughed. I was like, oh. And then I piggybacked on it, and I just said, well, I'm laughing because he wasn't pissed. He was just kind of like, oh, this guy doesn't believe. But I just piggybacked on it, and I just said, well, you're the second guy who said it. Bond said it. Worthy, did he kind of just set the tone for trying to do that? And he said, yeah. And he said that they run together and they work out together, him and Worthy. And I said, well, who wins? And he said, he wins some, I win some. And I was like, okay, well, I mean, I don't know. Running a 40 is a little bit different, but if he's winning some and I'm winning some, so he's expecting to run a 4.2. He's expecting to run in the 4.22s, which I don't know if that's going to happen. But he seems very confident. And the other thing that he said about his speed that I thought was hilarious was the Clemson run that everyone sees whenever they watch his highlights. He said he didn't run his fastest. He said he kind of started coasting. So he said that that wasn't really his fastest. So he said that he's ready. He's also from Houston. He's a Klein guy. I asked him how he would like to would he like to play in his hometown. He said yes, absolutely. I asked him, what did I ask him? What's the question that everyone asks?
Did you meet with the Texans?
Did you meet with the Texans? Yes. He said he has a meeting scheduled with the Texans, which means it might be one of the hometowns or a more formal type of thing. But let's just be serious. The intriguing thing about him is I think a lot of these running backs can help themselves that we've talked about, but I think you have a decent idea about what they bring. And I think there's a lot of high upside with the running backs that we've talked about with Hampton, Johnson, Henderson. There's a lot of high upside there, and they can run 40s. The 40 can hurt them badly, and they can just run a normal one, and they're still going to be the same type of prospect. If he's running the 4.22, I mean, it's going to be a day two type of situation for him, and people are going to start looking a lot more closely about his fumbling issues, which he has, but his receiving ability that was just completely untapped. In large part because Texas just has so many guys on the roster to where you can neglect players and still be able to win games. But
they might have won a few more if they hadn't neglected him.
Keep an eye on what this dude does tomorrow on the 40, because he seems very confident that it's going to be pretty impressive.
Well, if it's electric, I'm going to be excited for him. And I mean, this is one of the guys you've been talking about for weeks, and it's great that he's got a meeting scheduled with the Texans, and they'll get a chance to kind of watch. And then because he didn't get the ball as much, you can kind of take the success that he has had and do like a pretty good projection if you're going to make that big investment on day 2 in him. And if he goes and runs fast, I kind of agree with you. I do think he ends up as a day 2 guy because you can sort of project it, and there's not a lot of wear and tear on him. Some of these other running backs have had 1,000 carries in college.
Trading all good. He's one of the. There are some media types that feel this way. He says it's tacky to ask if they've met with the Texans.
Okay. Well, that's a weird
I think
way
it's
to
the only
describe.
question I care about. I cover the Texans. We're the top digital guys that cover the Texans. So sorry, localize it. We're not the only ones doing it.
Here's why a meeting at the Combine means something with the Texans, because Nick Caserio goes out of his way every time he talks about the Combine to say the interviews are the most important part. And he also always tacks on that the juniors that they don't get to talk to over the course of the scouting of the season, you get to finally talk with them and start continuing to build rapport with them, and then confirm maybe some of the things that you know about them or don't know about them. So it's an important aspect. It's like an even more important aspect for the Texans based off of the way the general manager talks about it.
And he says he was being sarcastic. I mean, a lot of people don't like the question, which is weird. What else are you going to ask in that situation? But Blue is an interesting prospect. The 40 is going to be. It's going to be a must watch. That's going to be one of those that you want to check it out.
I will be very interested to see if we start getting some big numbers tomorrow, because there was obviously some defensive linemen moving yesterday. There were some impressive defensive line numbers, but you're not getting a bunch of impressive numbers out of the tight ends in today's workout. So running backs, wide receivers, that's where dudes start flying tomorrow. And apparently they changed the turf a little bit here in Indianapolis. It's supposed to be a little slower, but we'll see if those guys.
What does that mean? Why?
They changed the pellets in the turf. So they got rid of those black pellets that you see sometimes. They changed them out with a different type of pellet.
That does what? Is it like bigger?
It apparently makes the surface play a little slower.
That's something.
I'm not a scientist. I don't know.
That's something nobody's talking about from Cody Stoots.
If you're fast, I can't imagine that much. I can't change it that much. Like is it worth 2 seconds? Like, no. Is it worth a couple of, really important seconds if you're trying to beat Xavier Worthy's record? Probably.
Yeah. And they're definitely trying to do that. So we'll see what that goes. The Ibuka chat again, just a sharp dude. Loves CJ. One of the more popular guys. I just don't. I don't see him being there at 25. I'm not seeing it. But that's probably another something to look at.
That's another guy. If he runs fast, moves up the board. Like there's a few guys where the speed doesn't matter.
Yeah, he's wide receiver 1 to 3. Like right now, it seems before we see any of these guys run. So
is Travis Hunter doing the right thing playing corner?
I think he's a better receiver.
I'm not also sure he shouldn't play receiver. But
would you be like if the Texans had the number 1 pick, what would you be saying right now? Trade?
Yeah.
Trade.
I'd be trying to convince the Browns to give me some more picks. They're sitting right next to me.
Oh, hey, let's run it back.
You guys want another quarterback?
You got a couple ones sitting around. Oh, they're coming back. You got a couple ones, maybe a couple twos.
Yeah, if the Texans had one in this draft, I'd be move it, trade it.
Yeah, but what if you had to pick a player? Let's pretend you have to pick a player. Who would you be talking about? There's no 100%.
Especially not after Abdul Carter's foot's messed up. The Penn State defensive lineman.
I would still probably have to take him.
I guess I'd take Cam Ward.
No, if you were the Texans.
Okay. Well, you said if I had to pick a player at 1.
No. If you're the Texans. No. Yeah. No. Not from Tennessee. From Texans.
Oh, if I was the Texans and I had number 1, I'd take Ted McMillan from Arizona.
You like him that much?
I think he's awesome.
Okay.
I mean, also, I would say if Travis Hunter told me he's going to play wide receiver, I'd take him.
And then use him as like a slot corner too?
Yeah, use him as like a emergency cornerback.
It's fair. All right. On that note, it's our combine wrap up. There's a lot going on here. Hell of a lot going on here. For Cody Stoots, I'm Landry Locker. Always remember when it comes to this Texan stuff, we're all in it together.
Eat good, sleep good, be good. We'll talk Texans again soon. Thanks for watching, everybody.